Hello, friend!
Hello!
Welcome to Discoverage 14.9 with Anne-Marie and Peter. We have some...
Previously on Star Trek Discovery.
From our last episode, which was about the memory, wasn't it?
If memory serves.
There we go. You see, ironically, I'd forgotten it.
And we've heard from Dimbo Sama. Hello! And he writes, I've really enjoyed this season, for the most part, more than I have the first half of the first season. I've got some complaints, like you have an issue with a lot of the directing in certain episodes, and I think it was cheap to bring both Ash and Hugh back. It kind of negates the sense of fluidity and uncertainty the show had in its first season. Obviously, if I wanted someone to come back, it would have been Hugh.
Yes.
And I appreciate the interesting direction they've taken with his character. I'd have hoped Ash would stay on Kronos, and it could justify the human-looking TOS Klingons, and we could forget Enterprise ever happened, but never mind then. I really dug the previously on featuring the cage. I don't entirely hate the new look of the Telosians, but they look a bit over-designed. I liked the playful barbs between Spock and Michael as well. The main thing I really want to get into is what happened between Michael and Spock as children. In my opinion, nothing that Michael could have done would have lived up to what they've been hyping. But what actually happened felt justified to me. Spock is possibly, depending on how seriously you take the rebooted movie universe, shunned by Vulcan society for being too human. But Michael rejected him for being Vulcan, for being a half-breed, which is a horrible thing to call a biracial person in real life, so it really hits. I don't think Michael comes out well in this regard because she's constantly trying to justify the logic of what she did when discussing it with Spock. When her motives were entirely emotional, she didn't want to lose her family again. Maybe she genuinely has always viewed him as a cold, logic-obsessed Vulcan and still does. This is, though, consistent characterisation for Michael. It's the same reason she mutinied against Georgiou. It's a recurring flaw in her character. I think, or rather hope, that their reconciliation will be a major plot for the rest of the season, and they'll examine this. Anyway, that's all I have for now. As always, love the podcast. Thank you for all the good work, and look forward to the next episode. Bye!
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and the problem for me is that it had got hyped up so much. My expectations were somewhat disappointed when we found out the real reason. It's still, like we discussed last time, it is bad what she said to him. I'm not disagreeing with that. It just wasn't quite at the level that I was expecting with the build-up beforehand, but there you go. It's all got to be hyped up these days, everything, doesn't it? We've also heard from Puri.
Hello, Orgs. Puri here to talk about the latest episode of Discovery, which, if memory serves, is called As Memory Serves. Right, so, and again, as always, this is recorded post-feedback, so just that for information. So, I enjoyed this. I think it was good that we got a lot of revelations. I do agree with you about Arium, and how I wish we... Arium... How I wish they'd made it a bit more subtle. I was actually kind of hoping to have the idea of her being something like not quite a Manchurian candidate, but the idea that to an extent she doesn't know that she's sabotaging things. Basically the system's kind of bypassing her. So in fact, most of the time she's perfectly good, but in fact she's doing. And again, if they'd been a bit more subtle, I think the fact that we keep seeing her, I thought it would have been really good if they'd done stuff like I quite liked when they're talking about Pike's pulling Ash up about his command codes being used, and you can kind of see Arium in the background. I'd have kind of like that where every time when the spore drive breaks. And she's not like in the background rubbing her hands with glee, but she's just there, but not staring or anything, working at her station. And have that idea of something you can kind of catch when you went back to it would have been good. As it is, we keep seeing her have her evil red eyes. Which, I'd rather not have. I think they could have done this better. Also, like I think you guys said, it makes me think that it's going to be... I mean, Discovery doesn't like things hanging around too long, but I think that's going to be sorted out fairly quickly, which is going to be a pain. I'd have liked to have seen this go, and... I would have really liked the idea of her struggling, the idea of her potential. Again, if you wanted to give her an actual character arc, you could have had... We might still have her either fighting the infection from the probe, or not realising that she's not in control of herself, which I think either would be quite good plot lines. I do hope they do something with it. It's just the lack of subtlety in this episode didn't help. The direction, which I think you commented, I didn't like all the whirly cameras. I think some of it worked. I'm not sure if it worked by accident or design, though, because... the kind of bad placing, the sort of big open spaces and that sort of thing were used everywhere. And I'm not sure if they really knew, it had a good effect in some scenes, but in other scenes it didn't work. Now, whether they just thought we'd be doing all the scenes like this, or whether they're actually doing something deliberate, I'm not entirely sure. Spock, I'm still not casting judgment on what's his name, Pekka's Spock yet, because he wasn't in his right mind again for most of this. We're beginning to get a bit of him, but not quite. The reason why him and Burnham fell out, I mean, I liked all the classic Trek stuff, all the Cage stuff, I really liked the intro. I actually liked them playing up the Vina-Pike relationship. I thought that was actually quite sweet and gave a bit more depth. And again, what I like about this is we get references to classic Trek, and in fact, it makes the menagerie better. You get more of an idea that if you look at the end of the Cage, you're not necessarily sure that Pike would return to Vina, when everything's finished, but this kind of does set in that, yes, it did make a bigger impression on him, so I think that that actually makes the Cage and the menagerie work a lot better, so that's good. It's contributing to what a prequel should do, is contribute to the original thing. The revelation of why Michael and Spock were broken up is roughly what I expected, and I don't think they could, as you say, they couldn't have gone any harder with what it was. And similarly, we couldn't have, but we didn't really want it to be anything else. So I think it's maybe a bit damp because it was expected. I think I'd have liked to have seen them play up a bit more that Spock idolised her. I think this is part of where it was maybe a bit flat for me, is they had to kind of tell us that Spock idolised Burnham, when I think we could have seen that through more flashbacks. We didn't really see it. We've seen a bit of it that they got on, but I mean, a lot of them were Spock looking jealously while Amanda read Alice in Wonderland, and I think if we'd seen more in flashbacks of Spock and Burnham's relationship, I think the breakup scene would have seemed a lot harsher, and I think we'd have had a bit more punch to it, but that's just my opinion. But overall, for all that I've kind of been criticising things, I did enjoy the episode. I thought it was, pretty good. And I like the fact the plot's moving, and indeed, we now know Section 31 set up Spock, so we can presumably set him up so they can steal him. So Section 31 are still being quite dodgy, so overall there's some very good stuff here. So all that remains for me to say is do keep up the good work. I always look forward to the podcast, and I'll hopefully feed back in the next episode. Until then, bye for now.
Bye, sir.
Bye. Yeah, I think in terms of the direction, it may well have been by accident, and so although I found that it did work for specific sections, it was used in others, the sort of from a distance thing. It was used in other sections and it didn't work in them. And you just generally found it annoying, didn't you, really?
But I'm old-fashioned like that. It's also true that I think the approach, particularly to the menagerie, is going to... It gives it more of an emotional wallop. The fact that we're sort of seeing Pike's relationship with Vina, and it's really fleshing that out wonderfully, so that it gives it a bit more impact when you go back and watch those original episodes. So
it makes more sense of Spock's behaviour in the menagerie.
It does that as well. You suddenly you're beginning to realise why he's so attached to Pike. Yes, because that seemed to come out. Well, it did come out in nowhere because he hadn't seen that relationship before, unless you'd seen the Cage somewhere. Anyway, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's move on to tonight's episode, which is Project Daedalus.
The subspace transmissions that Tyler sent, they went to 74 Mark 5.6, which is bizarre because there's nothing there. It's just a bunch of empty space in a penal colony that was abandoned over 100 years ago.
It's not abandoned. That's Section 31 headquarters. Where is Mr. Tyler, by the way?
Confined to quarters. He can't do any further damage. Start decrypting those transmissions. We need to know what he sent them.
Aye, sir.
Lieutenant Detmer, set a course for Section 31 headquarters.
Yes, Captain.
Admiral, with your permission.
The sooner we get there, the better.
Hit it.
So what is a Daedalus?
Daedalus was the skilled craftsman of Greek mythology who designed the labyrinth with its Minotaur at the centre.
Okay, why did he do that?
That I don't know. Wasn't he guarding something, treasure or some such?
Okay.
So the idea was to ensure that people never got to it. It's been too long since, and that makes it sound like I read the classics. I didn't remember Tony Robinson's series when he did all the stories and he narrated them. It was kind of like Jack and Rory, but it wasn't. It was like a self-contained series where he did all Odysseus and all those adventures.
No,
but it was probably before your time, I suspect. But anyway. Bottom line is, they mentioned the name of the title during the episode, so I'm happy.
Right.
Even though we've got no idea what Project Daedalus is yet, calling it Project Daedalus makes complete sense because it comes right at the end at a key moment. So cool by me.
Good-o.
Good-o, indeed. There's a mysterious beginning with a shuttle approaching Discovery, and you think, what the hell's going on here? And they spent ages over this.
And the shuttle is sort of red and black, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's
yeah,
not normal shuttle.
The lighting's a bit unusual, and the Discovery seems like it's got loads of its lights off. It looks a bit like it did in that one shot when it was set in the future, you know. And I was beginning to wonder whether they were going to make reference to that, but they don't. Because when the shuttle docks, we find, after a stupid, silly overhead shot we didn't need, but never mind, Frakes, it's Admiral Cornwell.
Yay, Admiral Greggs.
She's back. She interrogates Spock using some sort of a lie detector thingy. I mean, you worry, to begin with, it's more Section 31 tech that they shouldn't have, but no, it's literally just a lie detector. I suppose that's okay. Meanwhile, Michael is defending Tyler to Pike, who is having none of it. Not that we see Tyler in this episode at all. He's locked away in his quarters all episode. She then defends Spock, and when Cornwell says that she's his sister, so she's bound to defend him, Spock pointedly states that it isn't by blood that they're related. And that obviously clearly has an effect on her. The Admiral shows Pike footage of Spock killing staff on Starbase 5, which is all very brutal. She explains that Control is a computer system that Admirals feed data into, and it gives them recommended actions. The sort of thing I think Kirk would absolutely hate.
Absolutely.
It wouldn't be around by his time, I guess. To be fair, she herself extols the virtues of instinct over, you know, machines making your decisions for you. The person behind it all is a Vulcan logic extremist admiral who's insisting they just follow Control no matter what. But Cornwell wants to act against it and her. Tilly has traced the unauthorised signals as being sent to an abandoned penal colony, and it turns out that's Section 31 HQ, so off they warp. We see Ariam in her quarters reviewing her memory and deleting unwanted ones. It's a bit like the way you go through your phone and delete the pictures you don't want, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit.
They include her before all the tech was applied on a beach with her husband, who was killed in presumably the same shuttle accident that resulted in her being cybernetically augmented. And it's a nice way through this episode. There's a connection made between her and Detmer and the augments that she's got, presumably as a result of the injuries she sustained in the Battle of the Binary Stars. So what we're dealing with here, as some people complaining, it shouldn't be an android. She's not an android, she's a human being. It's just she's had an awful lot of augmentation as a result of an accident. And it's nice to have that background explained. It's a shame we're never going to find out more about it, I guess, but there we go. Stamets complains about Spock and Burnham not talking whilst he's working, but when they do talk and they just argue, he tells them to shut up again. Stamets is our only source of humour in this epised, it has to be said for the most part. Pike asks Cornwell what kind of shitstorm they're flying into.
I love that.
I love his turn of phrase.
Yeah.
31 HQ is mined, even though mines are forbidden by the Federation. Pike objects, and Cornwell reveals that he and the Enterprise sat out the war because they were saving them as they are the best of the Federation. Which I'm not sure is completely logical, but there we go. As I suppose it tries to explain that. Spock is rude to Michael about her quarters. Charming. And she challenges him to 3D chess. It does not go well.
No.
He ends up to being angry and enjoying it, which is all very odd, but again, it's quite possible since he's half human after all.
Yeah.
And if he was in his younger days, he'd have been dealing with those emotions, but yeah, it's quite painful to watch early Spock. I'm still not convinced it was a good idea to introduce him at this stage in his character development, really, but there we are. Nhan is getting suspicious of Ariam, who asks her about a breathing thing.
Chekhov's breathing thing.
It is Chekhov's breathing thing, yes. Cornwell shows Detmer the safe course through the mines, but says they have to have their shields down, because they'll attract them otherwise. And as it is, with their shields down, they still get hit because somebody's guiding the mines in, apparently.
Yeah.
So there are a variety of different mines, it turns out. Some are very daft. Rather than explode on contact, they cut into the hull, doing far less damage. Space fidget spinners, our son called them.
I think they called them blade mines.
Oh, I know, but that makes no sense. Others black out their navigation, which is rather more disruptive and understandable, and then there are some that just literally explode, interestingly targeting their propulsion systems. Pike raises shields, but that doesn't seem to be attracting them. And Burnham suggests flying randomly, which is supposed to fox the computer control of the mines, apparently.
Well, Burnham guesses that maybe it's a game, Because they make and that it's therefore being controlled by a computer. So if you do random stuff that the computer can't predict, you've got more chance of survival.
Mm-hmm. Admiral Patar seemingly hails to say the attack was under the orders of Starfleet. She accuses them all of treason and tells them to be prepared to be boarded. So I guess it's quite tense from the get-go, this one, really. Spock continues to be a dick, this time to Stamets. Never mind. And Burnham, Narn and Ariam beam over in EVA suits, as there's no life support. I like the fact that they've all got the right colours for their EVA suits as well. They discover Admiral Patar's body. She's been dead 2 weeks. Slightly strange, Andy and I were talking about this yesterday, that it's just the admirals you see. You don't see any other people in this station whatsoever, which doesn't make any sense, but I guess maybe they just didn't travel to the bits of the station where the other people were. Saru has the answer for how they've been talking seemingly to the dead. Apparently he didn't observe a tension-related temperature change when they were talking to her, so therefore it's a hologram. Well, A, she's a Vulcan, so she's not supposed to get tense. And B, how would he observe a temperature change over the view screen?
Oh, because he sees in other forms of vision, and so he would have...
Yeah, but why would the view screen be showing... It talks about it being infrared, doesn't it? Why would the view screen be showing that, since most of the crew can't see in that spectrum?
Well, because it would be transmitting in the full spectrum, which is not as everybody's viewing it. Same way as if it's mimicking natural light, it exists in all of the spectrum, regardless of what you yourself see.
Okay, that maybe works. I don't know, it's very hard to get my head around seeing things you can't see.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I think it makes some sense in that infrared is there whether you like it or not, and the idea that he can see it makes sense. But it doesn't, I don't think the way view screens work kind of... They don't take too much unpacking any more than a translator does.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? I think there's sort of, it works-ish, but you don't want to probe too far.
I would have preferred a sort of a more visual tell rather than infrared that would be more logical to be transmitted. But anyway, never mind. That's what the route they go down. He's also worked out that 31 has framed Spock because that's all holographic, the footage they've seen, and that they're fighting Control. Then, slightly randomly, Tilly has discovered that Ariam has downloaded all her memories into Discovery. I don't know what made her leap into checking that. I mean, you can see the moment when she goes, "Ooh, I better look at this." But it's like, why? What's Sparks off thinking about Ariam? But anyway, in its place, Ariam has downloaded all the data on the AI from the Red Sphere a few episodes ago. That's been playing into all sorts of episodes, isn't it? And they work out that Control wants to become sentient. So it's all sort of Terminator stuff here. Ariam turns on the away team, ripping Narn's breather off. And there's a brutal fight between her and Michael, who pulls off a couple of classic Kirk moves, including the launching your feet into somebody's stomach and ending up on your ass as a result.
But she didn't do that.
And the bash the ears thing as well. She's been watching... Well, she can't be watching Kirk in action, but anyway.
But she didn't do the drop kick to somebody already on the floor.
No, that she did the drop kick, but Ariam wasn't on the floor at the time. When just things are getting really brutal, and then there's a fade out. Yeah. Which is bizarre on Netflix, because... Do CBS show adverts? Or maybe that's why it is. Which is a cheat, because you're paying for CBS as a channel anyway, aren't you? But I suppose they must do, because otherwise there's no point in that teasy fade-out thing, is there? All this while, I'm going, what about Narn? We saw Narn go down, and she seemingly passed out or something. Why are we looking at Narn? But we're not looking at Narn, so there can be a reveal later on, basically. Tilly tries to stop Ariam by reminding her of who she is, by sending her memories, basically. And in turn, she tells Michael to open the airlock. Burnham doesn't want to do it, but both Pike and Spock order her to. Ariam tells Michael she has to find Project Daedalus. She's special. Again, apparently. But then she gets spaced by Narn, who's getting by on one breather just at this point. And the effects in this are absolutely stunning. And when you see her floating out into space and her last breath and all freezing over, and then you see in her eyes a memory. Yeah. Wow. All the crew look understandably upset. And the episode ends on no music. Sort of Earthshock style. Except we actually care about the person who's died this time. There isn't cheering at this point. Yeah. Wow. What did you think?
Generally, liked it seems the wrong word because someone dies at the end.
Yes.
But generally it was a good episode. But I was left with some questions at times. Mm-hmm. So Saru seems, when he does the whole thing about, there wasn't this, there wasn't that, he seems to be picking... stuff up. Why did he not pick up the lack of heat signatures earlier? Or was he not he was in the room when she was showing the footage. Why did he not go, but that's fake, they're holograms?
Don't know. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
So I don't understand that, unless he's done it by... There's a difference between a recording and live, and he had to do something to the signal of the recording to get the infrared to display.
Maybe. That would make some more sense. It wouldn't ordinarily show you infrared because nobody bugger can see it, but it's capable of showing it if you ask for it. Yeah, that works for me. Yeah.
Okay, so that answers that one then. Unfortunately, I'm now really rather worried about the Red Angel because Ariam turns around to Burnham and says, "It's you, it's all about you."
Yes, so it could well be Michael.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily have to be, but yeah.
It makes me worried that that's the case. The other thing as well is, what the fuck is a Vulcan logical extremist doing working in the Federation? Because they would hate the Federation, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And if you know that they're an extremist, you ban them from having any power because they're a terrorist and you lock them up, don't you?
Yeah, I didn't... The other bunch of people were called the logic extremists, weren't they?
Yeah, and the ones who attacked Sarek.
It only makes sense if Cornwall's saying that she's extreme about her logic rather than she's a member of the logic extremists, because like you say, that makes no sense that's a member of Starfleet then, and an admiral at that, so yeah, that is curious. Yeah,
so that was that for me. I was like, the what? That makes no sense. But the good stuff is I really liked that how you got to understand more about Ariam, and that she is still, yes, she has to download her memory and stuff like that, but she does still have feelings and emotions. And
yeah, I think the only shame is that we had to wait until the episode in which she
it would
died.
have been nice to see
it would have
sooner.
been even more of an impact at the end of this episode if we'd seen more about her earlier.
Yeah.
And we've said before that this season has been showing us more about the background characters, and we see more about the other crew in this one as well, their interactions with Ariam, which is really nice. But again, if we'd seen more earlier, this would have had a bit more of a kick to the... I'm not saying it doesn't have a kick to the guts, but it would have had more of a kick to the guts. It would have done,
yeah. But it's nice to see sort of how they've gone with it, that she isn't, like you said, she isn't an android. She's enhanced. And maybe it's because of what happens with her here that they stop doing it. Hence, we don't see enhanced in...
Yeah, but again, if this was as a result to save her as a result of medical procedure, it wasn't like she chose to be like this, but it was the only way to enable her to live a functioning life. So effectively, she suffered from a disability, and this enabled her to overcome the disability. It's not necessarily ideal either, but it helps her to live.
Okay, so in other words, she's as unusual as Pike in his chair of beeping.
Yes, one would hope there aren't too many people in that situation, yeah. But maybe that's why Pike wasn't reconstructed like this, going by your logic. They had to resort to the chair of beeping because they were worried about him being taken over. Because let's face it, there's very little damage he can do with just beeping.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't even move around like Davros, can he? Generally, people push him around, don't they? Yeah.
So yeah, that was my thinking, that it would explain it. Also, I think perhaps we're beginning to get the explanation of what happened to Section 31 if it all got taken over by a computer.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, maybe.
We'll have to see how the rest of it plays out. But that is a fairly catastrophic. And also, it's killed pretty much everybody on its own base. Do you know what I mean? It is a pretty catastrophic thing that it's gone and done.
It is, but yes, we are going to get a Section 31 series, so it's not going to cease to be. But you're right, it could result in it being people would think it was destroyed, but actually it's just going to go undercover from now on inwards. So this sort of thing can't happen again. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know, but it occurred to me. I like the idea of sentient computers taking over. On this one, it wants to become sentient, but isn't it already? If it's making choices and doing
it wants to
those
become
things?
more sentient and more.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
Once more.
So that kind of stuff, I like that sort of thing. So are we supposed to then think that Control framed Spock?
Yes.
Right. Rather than Section 31.
Well, to all intents and purposes, Section 31 is running Control at this point, because they've said that they've been paying attention to what Control has been saying. What's his face? The captain who's trained with Pike.
Oh yes, Leland.
Leland, that's it. Leland was saying in an earlier episode how much they were taking from Control. So,
okay, but what I mean is, it isn't people in Section 31 who have framed Spock.
No,
it's Control.
It's Control, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I did really like what Spock said to Burnham, where I mean, I know he was horrible about it, but it's true, and it goes some way of dealing with some of the way stuff has been portrayed in terms of Burnham, because she didn't start the Klingon War, but what he's saying is she blames herself for it, and she does it as a means of not facing reality and not grieving. It's almost like it puts control back with her rather than her facing a loss of control, except what she's doing is blaming herself for all sorts of things she never could have done anything about. But it's all about not facing up to reality. So she's not responsible for the Klingon War any more than she's responsible for her parents' death. But I like that someone came out and said it.
Cool. Yeah, generally really good episode, and I hope Ariam doesn't come back, because that really, having brought Hugh back and arguably Ash kind of back from, not quite from the dead, but certainly from his messed up state, I think there's got to be a sense that we don't know how many of these characters are necessarily going to survive for it to be tense.
Yeah.
Whereas, Trek in the past, you always knew those characters would get through. I suppose Jadzia being an exception, but anyway, right, let's find out what other people thought.
So what did Doreen make of this? She writes, "This was good. Following on from the insightful observations from, I think it was Andy, about this series being transformation." I think it was Andrew, wasn't it?
It was Andrew, yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned about it being transformation, yes.
Star Trek Discovery really seems to be exploring spiritual and religious ideas. There seems to be a lot about giving up one's ego, along with showing people and organisations who care too much about their image being bad news. I think this was exemplified by the argument between Michael and Spock while they were playing chess. In one way, they are both arguing the same point, in that they were telling the other to get out of their own heads and see the reality of the situation. But ironically, neither of them was actually seeing the situation from a logical perspective. I guess a bit like the remove the plank from your own eye so you can see to remove the speck from someone else.
Yes, I think that's what they're going for.
Yep. However, I think the episode was also alluding to not going the other way and being so humble that you hand over decisions to someone or something else. I'm referring to all the discussions about Section 31 wanting Starfleet to hand over decision-making to Control. Anthony said it reminded him of Samaritan in Person of Interest with Jim Caviezel. So I don't get that reference, I'm afraid.
I've not seen it, so I couldn't.
No.
Yeah.
And of course the opposite of all of the above, at the end where Ariam laid down her life to save Michael's and everyone else's. Or I guess in Star Trek Vulcan terminology, the needs of the one not outweighing the needs of the many. I'm going to miss Ariam. I was just getting to know and like her.
Yeah.
Will someone please hold that method cameraman down? Just because action is taking place on a spaceship doesn't mean we have to have zero-G camera work.
Exactly, yes. I'm glad it's not just me that noise.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doreen. We've heard from Andy Palastides. Wanted to send a few thoughts after a highly enjoyable episode of Discovery. In a way, this episode is very reminiscent to the Deep Space Nine episode The Ship, where Sisko finds the crashed Jemadar fighter, and poor ensign, whatever his name was, dies. I think it was Hoyer. And we are supposed to feel really bad for him. But this episode was the first time we'd seen him. Whereas we've seen Ariam in the background since Season 1, and with greater presence throughout Season 2, so her death carries far more weight than other background Starfleet deaths in the past.
Yeah.
It's just a shame they left it till Season 2, and this episode in particular, to expand on her backstory and her relationships within the crew. Exactly. I think it would have made a fantastic short trek, perhaps showing her relationship with Tilly and Detmer. I would have loved to have seen that instead of some of the ones we got, yes. I don't think we've seen the end of her story, however. I think a combination of her memories being downloaded to Discovery with the information from the Sphere might result in the creation of the Zora AI as seen in Calypso, which would at least make some sense of that nonsense, yes. On the subject of AIs and Control, it might interest people to know that the concept of Section 31 having an AI called Control comes from the novels, specifically Section 31 novels Disavowed and Control by David Mack. I won't go into any details, but I'm very interested to see how this will pay out compared to what is in the novels. Interesting that they're actually using some non-canon stuff, yeah?
If they are, I blooming well hope they credit this David Mack person.
Yeah, one would hope, wouldn't they? I also wonder if events like a potentially rogue AI using holograms of that sophistication to impersonate flag officers might lead to some sort of Federation-wide restrictions on certain technologies, in the same way that they ban cloaking technology or genetic engineering. It would explain why some of the tech we see in Discovery all but disappears until the later 24th century.
Yeah.
It's true. And why they take so long going back to holographic technology, in Next Generation. All in all, a very enjoyable episode. Discovery looked gorgeous in those opening shots. Yeah, okay. I'll take your word for it. And Anson Mount continues to climb hand over fist up the rank of the best Trek captains of every episode. If anything, it's making events in the menagerie all the more tragic. Indeed, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the next episode. Aha. Yes, we're looking forward to the next episode as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And of course, you can catch Andy on The Great Derelict, where he has various guests in talking about various sci-fi subjects. And
the latest one is Jim Moon and
2000
AD.
Yes, splendid stuff. You can also catch him on his Expanse podcast that he does with Elton. And if you're into racing cars, they also do a Formula One podcast together as well. Alrighty, let's hear from somebody else on the MP3s.
What did Martin have to say about this one?
Good morning, Orgs. Well, unless you've been kidnapped by some strange man in a DeLorean during the night. So, yes, it's Martin again. I'm very sorry about last week's feedback. I will try to keep it down, honestly, I promise. Right, firstly about last week, I thought some very interesting topics came up. The theme of transformation, I hadn't really thought about that, but yes, it's definitely there, and it's definitely continuing this week as well. And also, let me see. Yeah, the arguments between Spock and Burnham, I mean, it's obviously something that's been left there to fester for a long time, so perhaps I misjudged that a little bit. Certainly you can see it in this week's episode with a lot of the arguments and the back and forth between the two. They have some good scenes. I also wanted to just to address something Llama God said last week as well. He just asked about whether there's anybody watching Discovery who hasn't really much of Star Trek, and that's myself. I'm afraid I've watched all the movies. I've watched the last 2 series of Discovery, and I've watched like a handful of TV episodes. That's about it, I'm afraid. I will try to do that at some point, just to catch up on my Trek watching. But it does look a bit of a feat. But I will definitely have to get into it at some point. It's something I never really. I don't think it ever really appealed much to me as a kid. Actually, referring to the films, I wonder if the globules of blood we saw in this episode nod to Star Trek 6, maybe? I don't know. But anyway, Netflix spoiler watch, a picture of Arium. Well, that doesn't really tell us much, thankfully. And Cybok watch. No further mentions of Cybok, so we will keep on until next week, and we'll see. Right. Well, overall, initially I thought this might have been a bit of a filler episode from where it was going, but of course, it led us into some quite dark places. We get to know Arium, and then she's gone at the end of the episode, which I think has caused mixed fan reaction online. But it's a shame we didn't hear a bit more from her earlier. I found some of the dialogue a bit clunky. About Arium just remarks to Non about her breathing apparatus, and again we find out about Pike during the Klingon War. I mean, why do we need to know this anyway? Why is this important? It just seems to be coming up, and that's the thing with Non as well. She just seems to be a lot of times she just seems to be hiding in the various parts of the set. For some reason, I think she's wearing something different. Is she wearing a different uniform? She's got like a dress or a skirt on or something. I don't know. I need to go back and have a look at that. We seem to be heading for Mad Computer, which is interesting. The system's gone mad again. It's something where I didn't see it going, so it's always nice to not go in expecting the expected, which is a very odd phrase. But yes, some lovely Pike moments as well. I think the things were attacking the ship. It's like, oh, this is impossible. Well, apparently it is. This is a man who has seen too much. This is a man who's skipped along the highways in a mushroom network, and we still seem to be repairing that as well, don't we? Again, like we said, apart from the other week, we still seem to be heading into the mycelial network. I also love the Doug Jones reading of mines. Starfleet doesn't allow mines. What is it with sci-fi actors and the word mines? I don't know if he's mentioned the Mind Probe at all, but you must never mention the Mind Probe, because no, not the Mind Probe. Yes, just oh yes, that's what I was going to say. The themes as well. I figured it out. It's the Cornetto trilogy. Season 1 was blue. Season 2 is red. If Season 3 is green, it's obviously in the wrong order, but it stands. Cornetto trilogy. So yeah, just very quickly to sum up, I quite enjoyed this one. I think it will provide a few mixed thoughts with fans, but where it's clearly moving the plot along. I enjoyed Ethan Peck as Spock as well. I thought there's some great scenes with him and Burnham, and that's really all I can think of now, apart from when I press the stop button and I suddenly think of half a dozen things more I wanted to say. Okay, so I will catch you next week and we'll see where we go from there. I'm sure there will be a much more in-depth discussion than I can provide. Okay, thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Never, don't feel the need to apologise about not having seen all the Trek. It's wonderful, actually, that we're getting a sort of fresher viewpoint on it, so that's excellent.
Yeah. And also, the other forms of Trek, they're quite different. We're not fans of Voyager, so if you try another type of Trek and you don't like it, don't feel bad.
No.
There's enough Trek out there.
Exactly, and the different series are different enough from each other. Possibly the problem with Voyager is it isn't, I suppose, arguably. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah. Yes, I like your theory that it is the Cornetto trilogy.
Yes, so that's a reference to Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and End of the World's End, wasn't it? Yes, that was yes, the Cornetto trilogy of films. But yeah, it could be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if they do go for a. It's not been so noticeable later on into this season, whereas early on literally everything was red.
Yeah.
We've had a few more blue things since then. But yes, it would be amusing if everything's green in the next season.
Yeah, and I did notice Nan hiding in corners. I think it's supposed to be because she's watching Ariam.
Yes, I think
it looks odd that she's hiding in corners, though, don't you think?
Yeah, no, they're making a big thing of it in the same way as they made a big thing of Ariam's red eyes. And yeah, I think it's so that we understand that she's sort of standing ready in order to open the airlock at the end, I guess, because she's suspicious of her from quite early on into the episode. I was expecting her to say something at some point.
Yeah, kind of would help.
Yeah, I mean, she even gave Michael a glance when Michael sort of sends her off when they're on their way team to do something to get gravity and the electrics back on. And she's like, "You'll be okay, won't you? Do call me if you need me," or something like that. And very pointedly, yeah. I get that the floating blood did remind me a bit of Star Trek 6. Yeah,
me too. Yeah, so it might have been a deliberate nod.
Yeah. Nan was wearing the scant version of the uniform, which has the skirt, which we have seen her wear in previous episodes as well. Although I don't think in the first one we saw her in, but yes, in later ones. But we didn't see so much for her in those. And other crew members, noticeably not any of the regulars, but there have been other crew members wearing the scant in the background before now. But it's a nice sort of tradition they're carrying on, basically, from Next Generation, curiously.
Which I like.
Yeah, and of course in those men wore those as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see if we get any men wearing the scant in the new series, which would be nice.
Yeah.
Yes, and Spock and Michael going hammer and tongs. Yes, that's definitely a thing in this episode, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, we hear from Andrew.
So that was the end of Ariam. We hardly knew ye. No, we hardly knew you. Okay, I'll be honest. I've listened to all the broadcasts. I haven't always watched the episodes that you've been covering in the broadcast. I haven't seen the episode where Jadzia Dax dies. I don't even know if you've done the episode where Tasha Yar dies. But to me, I can't remember an occasion in Star Trek where someone has been killed off and it's been treated with quite as much enormity as this, since Spock, really, where everybody feels it, and it's a loss to everyone. Not even any end credit music, just she dies, and then in 15 seconds you can watch Love, Death and Robots, which, let's face it, is actually quite appropriate. Would the loss of Ariam be felt more keenly had we known her better throughout the entire duration of the series up till now? Probably yes. But I think the episode does as much as it can and does it as well as it can to create that sense of who she is and the relationships that she has on the ship within the limited amount of time that they have. If nothing else, I think the actors try their absolute hardest to try to sell the sense of community and the sense of friendship that exists among them. I found Ariam in this episode actually a little reminiscent of Londo in Babylon 5 when he gets the Keeper. It seemed to me Ariam was aware of what had happened to her, but she couldn't tell anyone. The most that she could say was to Tilly, "Stand next to me until we figure this out." keep an eye on me because I'm not in complete control of myself right now. And that was as much as Ariam could say to alert Tilly that something was wrong without letting Control know that she was letting Tilly know that something was wrong. Her being trapped like that just reminded me of how Londo was trapped like that at the end of Babylon 5. Spoilers for Babylon 5. One thing which I noticed about this episode was the importance of the outsider's perspective. And that kind of tracks also the fact that this episode was written by this show's new co-showrunner on her first script. You've got Spock offering some outside perspective on Stamets and Culber's relationship. You've got Stamets offering some outside perspective to Spock, and you've got Nan, whose outsider perspective allows her to be a little suspicious of Ariam. I just thought that was an interesting little theme of the episode there. I bet things are going to be awkward for Nan in the mess hall for a little while going forwards. I'm not sure why they couldn't have beamed Ariam aboard from space, though, like they did to Ash Tyler in Season 1. That seems like quite an oversight given the precedent, unless this is a necessary plot point in the service of something else. But even so, it doesn't seem like there's an awful lot of in-the-moment justification for why they don't beam her aboard and put her in the brig and deal with her later, other than just they forgot that the transporter was a thing. Or that they were just too horrified by the situation to remember that the transporter was a thing. Either way, sucks to be Ariam. Do I think we've seen the last of Ariam? All her memories are on Discovery now. And the show already has form for bringing people back from the dead, so maybe, maybe not. I'm sure I'm not the only one who, after watching this episode, went back and re-watched Calypso. Zora says she's been improving herself for the 1,000 years that she's been abandoned. That's 1,000 years in which to have a look inside Ariam's memories, perhaps. Maybe that's why Zora's chosen a woman's voice. According to the estimable Twitter account Trekcore, by the way, Ariam has in her quarters statues of a Buddha and a Vishnu. And me being not especially knowledgeable about Hinduism, I went looking online for information about Vishnu. And I found this little nugget, which I'm going to read to you. It's on the website ancient.eu, which says, "A complex character, Vishnu is the preserver and guardian of men." Women presumably have to deal with things on their own. "He protects the order of things, and when necessary, he appears on Earth in various incarnations or avatars to fight demons and fierce creatures and so maintain cosmic harmony." Now, is the show hinting at something with this? Or is it a red herring? Or is it just reading too much into it altogether? Might Ariam's death and the fallout from that and the circumstances of it have influence over things as yet unseen? Time will tell. And of course we find out right at the end that Control wanted Burnham dead because everything was because of her. How's that going to play out? Again, we'll have to wait and see. That's all I think. Thanks very much. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, I don't think we're going to get Vishnu in Trek anytime soon, but I guess that's not what you meant. But interesting, he went to Azora Place as well.
Yeah, I think quite a few people would have done. Absolutely, it would have had more impact if we had known her better.
Yes, but it does at least have a reasonable impact because they made some steps towards that anyway.
Yeah, they did.
It was interesting, our daughter asked why they didn't beam her out from space. And I guess the answer is because she'd gone completely rogue to the extent that even she couldn't control herself.
Yeah.
So the best they were going to do was try and shoot her in the first place anyway. And because they couldn't do that, ejection into space was the only way of getting rid of the risk that she...
Yeah.
And she said she wanted to destroy... She admitted she was going to destroy the whole of Discovery.
Yeah.
So
you
unfortunately...
can't put her in Discovery. And also, I think as well, the way the ship is designed, there are things that she could potentially interface with everywhere. So even putting her in the brig, for her as an augmented human,
probably wasn't an option.
Yeah,
no, right.
that's what I presumed.
Yeah. And you're right, there is a sort of theme of outsider stuff in this as well. Very good picking up these themes for us. And there's also definitely a Londo Keeper vibe going on as well.
Yeah, very much so. That she couldn't say anything to anyone without it causing even more problems.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And finally, we've heard from the Llama God.
Who's also the god of alpacas, we discovered.
Yes, having met some of his subjects today.
Llama God's logs, got date, noi Jake, tree, sheer Jake. So long, Ariam. It's time that we began to laugh and cry and laugh about it all again. All right then, this was an episode with an awful lot of stuff going on, wasn't it? And quite an emotional episode. Or was it? Well, I mean, definitely there was a lot of emotion on display in the episode, but how did it actually work? I guess that's probably what I should start talking about, isn't it? Okay, the main thrust of the episode then. Ariam. Yes, this was very sad. Unfortunately, whilst it was sad, it was also a little bit annoying. Partly because the whole death was signposted at the very start of the episode. As a character who's not had an awful lot to do, or an awful lot to say, until very recently when she got hijacked by the Matrix squid things, and suddenly we start the episode with getting rid of backstory of her. This is good that Discovery actually dealt with the issue of her being compromised quite soon rather than letting it run on. But it also strongly hinted that if we're being told about who she is, then we need to care about her, and that's because she's going to die, isn't she? And yeah, she did die at the end of the episode. Now, I did like it. I liked the progression. I liked what the character was doing. I did like that we got to learn about her. I mean, obviously, given that she was some sort of part cyborg, it was obviously going to be one of two things, which was either that she'd suffered some sort of tragic accident, or that she would actually opted for augmentation, and they went the obvious emotional manipulation route, but that's fine. And it was also really good to see that she obviously had some sort of idea that she was being taken control of, because the bit where she asked Tilly to come and stand with her all the time, but can't quite explain to Tilly why she needs her to do that. I mean, that was good. You know, this redeems the character a lot in a lot of ways, because she didn't completely have control. The good person she was still in there. And so it's good that we find out that she was being hijacked. Quite how much she was working with the Section 31 intelligence or not, I'm not entirely sure. Quite what the Time Squid was trying to do by reprobing her, I guess that's another question. I know that they posit in the episode that maybe just maybe it's because it's Section 31 itself which is trying to wipe out all sentient life in the galaxy, but that seems too easy. I don't know if there's going to be a red herring flavoured angel or something, I don't know. But Ariam's actual death, it seemed unnecessary to me. I know that obviously there was the door, but why couldn't they beam her out? Did I miss something about the transporters being offline? But even if they couldn't have beamed directly into the Section 1 facility, by the time she'd been blasted out into space, they had a few seconds to beam her out of space. It seems kind of rather random that they just kind of left her to die floating there in space. They didn't even try and send a shuttle out or anything. So yeah, I'm a bit disappointed they did leave her to die, really. And I'm hoping that, really hoping this doesn't prove to be a fake out next week, because given they put us through the ringer with this, and we've already had a couple of fake outs this season, that will be a very, very bad thing to see. So yeah, it was emotionally touching, and I was upset, mostly because of the reactions of the rest of the crew. And, you know, it was well filmed, well directed and everything. Jonathan Frakes did a great job with this, but ultimately it was niggling at me. Couldn't they have found another way to save her? Because, you know, they usually do in Trek in these kind of situations. The other side of things, the batshit thing, the actual reason they're on the mission, is that Section 31, at least it's being addressed as to what Section 31, the actual intelligence agency, is there for, and why it's got such a poor remit. It's because the Klingon War and Starfleet panicked and lost control of its morals, which is kind of what we saw happening, and is also par for the course for Starfleet. But discovering that it's actually controlled by a giant artificial intelligence, and that they put a Vulcan logic extremist in charge of it, I mean, that seems not like the brightest move, Starfleet. If you're going to put someone that you can happily describe as an extremist in charge of something, then yeah, that's a really bad idea. And yeah, okay, sure, we find out that the Vulcan logic extremist has been killed by the space station, potentially killed preemptively, I don't know, maybe she was going to go off to do something quite terrible. It seems like Starfleet didn't make their best move. And then we have Spock in this episode. Spock continues to be not played like any of his previous incarnations. I mean, as I said last week, he's playing as James Fane's Sarek's son, so from that point of view, Ethan Peck's acting kind of works really well. Whether he's a good Spock or not, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely aspects of Spock here showing some of his emotions, playing both sides of his personality that we've come to expect from other incarnations with Spock. But he was just too much of an arsehole this week. Whilst I did enjoy the sparring between him and Michael, that was really well observed and really well played. I really like that side of things. He did just come across as a bit of a dick in a lot of the episode. And Joe did say, this is the great Spock. Why is he so great? I just want to throw stuff at his head. And yeah, I can't really have any defence for that. I mean, obviously this is a younger Spock than the one we've mostly known, but still, yeah, less of Spock being a dick, please. More of him being the Spock that we know would be nice. But I guess this is his story arc, and this is Spock Begins. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. And I also really enjoyed his little altercation with Stamets, and Stamets having absolutely no time for Spock's bullshit. And indeed, there was a bit of redemption when they actually say some nice things to each other. I mean, it's a bit out of character for Spock, I guess, given that he doesn't usually open up quite that much. Like, for example, not telling people that he has 2 siblings. Never mind. And I guess at least Spock does earn himself a bit of redemption by the end of the episode. But yeah, it's still a bit too much of a dick for too much of it. And finally, Greg. I thought it was a bit odd that Greg was coming on board, but she was coming there to kick ass, and no mistake, and helping Pike to kick ass. And Pike continues to be such a fantastic character. He's clearly spent long enough on the Discovery now when he discovers that the situation at Section 31 being a shitstorm. That was great to see. And he's just great. I mean, the bit where Greg describes him as being the best of Starfleet, I mean, that was... he is. He really is, and there's not a lot you can say about that. My gripes aside, this was definitely an enjoyable romp. If I hadn't been thinking too much about how, in Star Trek ways, they could have saved Ariane, then it would have definitely been a lot more engaging. But Jonathan Frakes did a really good job with this, and it was very well acted, produced, etc., etc. So yeah, no, this was a really good episode. Oh, and my other highlight of the episode was seeing in Pike's ready room just how exactly excited he was to be on that mission to take out Section 31. Really very excited. Yeah, distractingly so. Anyway, okay, again, interested to see what other people thought of this very eventful episode, and until next week, glory to you, Borgcast.
Thank you, sir.
There you are.
It is nice seeing Pike excited. I like seeing Pike excited.
I was wondering if it was suggesting that was too visual, if you see what I mean.
Ah.
I'll have to relook at that scene just to see if that's the case. If so, I didn't notice it.
No.
And yes, as Amri's also pointed out, the having a logic extremist in charge of...
Really not clever.
What were they thinking?
Yeah.
And it is quite hard to like Spock. I'm wrestling with that this season, but as you say, I mean, it could just be that this is the way that Spock was at this stage. It's just unfortunate because you've got a different actor. You don't know how much of it is him playing Spock in a different stage and how much it's him not being able to play Spock, if you see what I mean. But there we go.
Well, the only thing I would say is that he is being a dick, and I completely understand why Joe wants to chuck stuff at his head. But you have to remember what Pike says about Spock and how Pike cares about Spock.
Yeah, but you don't understand why, really.
That Pike has said that Spock is not himself. So I think this is deliberate, that this is not supposed to be the real Spock. This is messed up Spock trying to find a solution. And when he does or comes to terms with the fact that there isn't one, whichever happens, he will then go back to being the Spock that Pike clearly cares for.
Bring back chill Spock.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who's fed back.
Thank you.
Next week's episode is called The Red Angel. I wonder what that's about.
Toothpaste.
Clearly. Yes. All that character from Home and Away. Well, anyway, we shall see. We'll be getting more answers next week, possibly, maybe, although there's still plenty of the season to go yet, so they can't answer everything. But anyways, we look forward to it.
Yeah.
And hopefully there'll be some reference to Ariam dying, and they won't just carry on like nothing happened in this episode. I'm sure they won't make that mistake. But
do you think we'll get another one of them funerals?
Maybe. Anyways, we shall find out. Take care, cheery bye.
Bye.
Come over to the window, my little darling. I'd like to try to read your palm. I used to think I was some kind of gypsy boy before I let you take me home.
All music referenced is for illustrative purposes only, and no copyright infringement is intended.
Find our website at borgcast.libsyn.com.
And we have a YouTube channel as well.
You can find the Borgcast playouts on Spotify for your listening pleasure.
Visit our Tumblr site at borgcast.tumblr.com, where you'll find images accompanying the episodes discussed in this cast.
Send emails or MP3s to borgcast@gmail.com.
Or you can contact us via Twitter on rev_org or borgcastammo. #Borgcast.
But you make me forget so very much. I forget to pray for the angels, and then the angels forget to pray for us. So long, Marianne. It's time that we began to laugh and cry and cry and laugh about it all again. We met when we were. Shut it down!
Off, you bugger. Off.